Hi, today we finally have another video today for all of us 4080 peasants out there. And for those of us who also wish to become peasants, I would like to upgrade their level of peasantry. After finally coming to terms with the crippling regret of going with a 4080 instead of the 90, you're probably asking yourself, what's the next terrible decision I can make? But before you sell your kidneys to build yourself an RGB layer of darkness, maybe you should buy a new processor instead. And today we're going to take a look at a couple of CPUs that you might be considering, and seeing whether it's worth your while going with a 5800X 3D over the 5600X. The CPUs were paired with 32GB of 3200MHz CL16 RAM, and I'm using Windows 10 and rebars enabled. I decided to include a few single player 2023 games, some of the most demanding ones. Some aren't actually that demanding, but still. I included some popular multiplayer games that aren't from this year, but are the most demanding ones that I'm aware of, and are still being updated to this date. And I also shot Plague Tale in there, as it has some of the best graphics I've seen, and it's just as demanding as most of the 2023 games. I actually put in a test with the ray tracing, but it's completely unplayable with ray tracing, so I thought I'd keep it in the video anyway without RT. All my data was taken with MSI Afterburner, but as there's so many settings per game, I won't be showing the Riva stats overlay, as the 60 series will be out by the end of the video if I do. So we'll just have some gameplay behind the stats today. But for those of you who do want to see the overlay, I will be releasing separate videos for most of the games, with the split screen and Riva stats overlay to show how they compare in real time. Anyway, let's do it. Starting with The Last of Us Part 1, and I don't want to give anything away on this one, but it's not very nice to your CPU. I took my data from a little bit near the start, with loads of explosions, fire and a lot of people running around the little area where this explosion was taken from. It's one of the most demanding areas on your CPU in the game, at least that I've found anyway. There's not a load of settings on this one, as your CPU limited pretty quickly, so I just kept it simple. Starting with 4K Ultra, and we're pretty much neck and neck average wise, slightly better 1% lows and minimums for the 5800X 3D, but when adding DLSS balanced, the 3D does take a nice lead there, giving you 20 frames better, with better 1% lows and much better minimums, allowing for a lock 60 on the 5800X 3D, but not on the 5600X. Turning down to high settings now, we see both CPUs getting much better averages and slightly better 1% lows. But when adding DLSS balance, we're seeing both systems completely CPU limited here, getting no more FPS than they were at the ultra settings with DLSS balance. Moving down to medium settings, the CPU gets a little bit of a break here, allowing both CPUs a bit of a boost to performance, but the 5800X 3D is still much smoother. And when adding DLSS balance now, it finally allows the 5600X to hit a 60 FPS lock there, but it's only just, so I can't guarantee it's going to hold. And the 5800X 3D is a massive 31% faster here, with 24% better 1% lows. Now we have 1440p Ultra, and we're pretty much completely CPU limited with both CPUs now, gaining nothing when adding DLSS quality for the 5600X, and a tiny little boost for the X3D, making it 31% faster than the 5600X at this setting. Moving down to high settings, and there's basically no difference for either CPU here, performing within margin of error of the ultra settings. Moving down to medium takes a little bit of strain off the CPU once again, but not enough to make any noticeable difference to gameplay, allowing the X3D to increase its lead to 32%, and a massive 38% better 1% lows. Now we have 1080p, not surprisingly, nothing really changes. Bit of deja vu here. If anything, you're getting slightly worse results with the 5600X. We won't include any DLSS here, as you can probably imagine what's going to happen. But yeah, it's really bad on your CPU, this one. The 5600X here only able to get me a lock 60 at one setting that I tried. And even the 5800X 3D massively holding the 4080 back here in this game, as however they've created the game engine, it just likes to hurt your CPU pretty much. Right, so now we have our first multiplayer title of the video, which is Battlefield 2042. I'm going to include quite a lot of settings here, going down really low because there's a lot of performance to be gained. And for those of you who believe frames win games, this could be important information. Unfortunately for me, frames still don't win games, so this is a bot match. This is where I took my data from, this level, and I just run from the starting point, which is the US side, to this checkpoint here, C1, stood around for a bit, then ran back to the bottom there, and that was the end of my run. There's possibly more demanding areas or sections of the game, but should give you an idea of how each CPU perform against each other anyway. Starting with 4K Ultra, we see both CPUs pretty much match within margin of error anyway, and both CPUs are capable of a locked 120 here with a bit of DLSS. The X3D having 19% better 1% lows with DLSS balanced, and 23% with DLSS performance, and slightly better averages. Now we have high, medium and low settings. We're pretty much neck and neck in averages. A few frames to the X3D there, but the X3D is much smoother in 1% lows, being 18% faster at high, 16 at medium, and 18% faster at low settings. Now we have 1440p and we're starting to see some big differences between the CPUs now. Both are still able to provide a great frame rate. The 600X is completely CPU limited with DLSS here, falling short of reaching a locked 144Hz, which is a pretty easy task for the X3D, which is 12% faster at Ultra and around 17-18% faster with DLSS. Turning down the settings instead of using DLSS allows the 5600X to scale a lot better, both CPUs hitting massive frame rates now. And although the X3D is beating it in all areas with such high frame rates and the gaps not being that far apart, I doubt it's anything you're going to actually notice in gameplay.
Objective lost. We need to retake it.
So now we have 1080p. I'm just going to have DLSS quality here. And as you can see, the 600X CPU limited straight away here, but hitting some good frame rates. But the X3D is 22% faster at best, and has better 1% lows and much better minimums.
Don't like the looks of that.
Turn down the settings now, and as you can see, the X3D is able to max out a 240Hz monitor there with its minimums of 250. Both CPUs getting massive frame rates, but the X3D's averages are 17% better at high, 25% better at medium, and 27% better at low, with better 1% lows too, and much higher minimums. So as you can see in this game, both CPUs are more than capable of getting some really high frame rates, and the 5600X is probably enough for most people realistically. Although the 5800X 3D can give you a much smoother experience, and if you are someone who can feel the difference between 290 odd frames a second and 230, then it might be for you. So next up we have Resident Evil 4. I took my data from a little route I do around the village here, starting in this building what I'm running up to now. Jumping out the window, running around the village, try to keep it as close as possible to the same, but being the type of game it is, the enemies are always going to do different things, so it's impossible to get exact. But I did want to use this village scene because it's really intensive, so it'll give you a kind of worst case scenario of what you can expect to get frame rate wise. Starting with 4K max settings here, and as you can see we're pretty much neck and neck, within margin of error I'd say. So we're going to move straight to the FSR settings. And immediately, even at 4K, you see the 5600X completely CPU limited here, allowing the X3D a 22% lead in averages and 29% better 1% lows at the quality settings, and a massive 42% lead in averages and a 37% lead in 1% lows with FSR performance. Turning down to prioritised graphics, the X3D has a slight advantage in averages and a 15% lead in 1% lows. Adding FSR, we're stuck once again with the 600X, completely bottlenecking the 48 here, allowing for up to 43% better averages and much better 1% lows and minimums. So if you're after the hardware unboxed, 90 is the new 60, you're going to at least need the X3D here. Now we have 4K balanced and both CPUs see a slight improvement over the prioritised graphics setting, but once again you're seeing that hard limit with the 5600X here. So down to 1440p we go. This is max settings, and just like 4K, it seems like when you have ray tracing enabled, you're basically hard locked to an 81 FPS average with the 5600X, at least at the max preset anyway, allowing the X3D 47% higher averages and 51% higher with FSR quality. So now we move down to prioritised graphics, and once again we're completely limited here, actually on both CPUs. Both are capable of really nice averages though, but the X3D does pretty much destroy the 600X here, with 49% better averages and 46% better 1% lows. And I was able to lock 120 there with FSR quality. Now we're moving down to balance settings, and as you can see, we're hitting that same wall again. Pretty much exactly the same frame rates here. So straight down to 1080p now, and you'll probably recognise these numbers from earlier, or at least very similar ones. Both systems completely CPU limited here, leaving the 4080 to pretty much twiddle its thumbs. So Resident Evil 4, there is a lot of frames to be gained from going with the X3D, but if you're someone who's happy with 60 FPS, you can pretty much play any setting in the game and be fine with the 5600X. But at best you're going to be gaining 20 FPS from turning down settings or adding FSR, so if you want more than that you'll have to go for the 5800X3D or the upcoming 5600X3D or some other more powerful CPU. So now we're going to have a go of Dead Space. And I took my data in this one from just like a little route that I ran round. I picked an area where you'd get some nice high frame rates in certain bits and some lower ones, so there's a good representation of the averages you can get while playing the game. Starting with 4K Ultra settings, as usual we're pretty neck and neck here. Slight difference in 1% lows there, but within margin of error. So we're straight to DLSS now. And the X3D gives us a nice boost to 1% lows, averaging in the low 20s. But as you can see, by the 1% lows here, there is some stutters in this game, and they're pretty bad. But the X3D does make them feel a little bit less game ruining. I'm going to skip high settings in this one as there's just no difference between high and ultra. So we're going straight to medium settings. And once again we're within margin of error here, so no difference. Adding DLSS, both CPUs still scaling pretty well here. The X3D having a slight lead here, but nothing major, nothing over 10%. But it does have a little better 1% lows, and the minimums are a bit higher, so the stutters will be just a little bit less upsetting. So just in the way that going down from ultra to high didn't change anything, going from medium to low also doesn't affect performance in any way that I could see. So straight to 1440p now, and we're finally able to see some noteworthy gains with the 5800X3D, with 15% averages with DLSS quality and 20% at DLSS balance. Once again the minimums are much better too. It's just a shame about the stutters in this game really, as other than that both CPUs are able to provide a great experience. Hopefully they'll be able to fix it before there's a remake of the remake. So now we're going to go down to medium settings here. And as you can see, the 5600X being CPU limited there, beyond DLSS quality, nothing to be gained really, well, other than minimums. X3D able to best it by 22% at best, with up to 33% better minimum and 22% better 1% lows.
So far.
Now we're going down to 1080p, and we'll include a bit of DLSS here, as it actually doesn't look too bad in this game. But as you're already getting like 183 FPS, you probably wouldn't use it. So without it, we're getting a nice boost of 15% averages with the X3D, and 16% minimums with a slight boost to the 1% lows. So yeah, once again, both CPUs capable of getting great frame rates in this game, so either would be fine, but as the game is pretty broken stutter wise, I guess neither would be fine. But if they do ever manage to fix it, I don't think I'd be particularly worried about which CPU I had in this game, at least out of these two anyway. So now we have Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. This is the multiplayer, not Warzone, and I actually use the game's inbuilt benchmark in this one, as it's very repeatable and gives me a much more accurate result. Warzone performs a lot differently to this game, so don't look at these numbers and think this is how my Warzone's going to perform. Warzone just basically kneecaps your CPU and teabags it into the ground. I'll have a little mini Warzone video out with these CPUs soon though. So at 4K, we have ultra settings, DLSS balanced and DLSS performance, and in this one we're basically completely neck and neck. All the numbers are within margin of error, so if you're playing at 4K, at least on ultra settings, either CPU is fine here. And both are capable of 120 FPS lock, at least in the benchmark anyway. And then we're going to turn down the settings, so we have balanced, basic and minimum settings here. And strangely it seems like we're getting better performance with the 5600X, at least by a tiny little bit anyway, until we go down to the minimum settings and really become CPU limited here, where the X3D completely destroys it, being 46% faster on average, 37% better 1% lows, and 41% better minimums. Now we're going to move down to 1440p. And we see the X3D confidently taking over now when adding DLSS, although pretty matching without. Both CPUs are doing well though, and it's really just down to personal opinion, like preference, whether you feel an extra 40 FPS over 200 is making much of a difference for you. Is a 20% boost to averages, and a 12% boost to 1% lows though. Anyway, now we're going to turn down the settings, and we're finding ourselves quickly limited here with a 5600X, barely gaining any frames at all for the hit to image quality, whereas the X3D scales pretty well. It's capable of a massive 328 frames a second on average, and over 250 in the minimums. It will look pretty terrible like this though, as it does have its own image scaling on at the minimum setting, but is 52% faster than the 5600X. Anyway, on to 1080p, both CPUs are capable of some great frame rates here. The 5800X3D able to beat the 5600X by 34% at best, while keeping a reasonable visual quality. Now we turn down those settings to see what we can do to ruin that visual quality. We won't include minimum here because it's basically like a blind fury simulator, especially if you use little samurai swords. And as you can see, the 5600X has got barely anything left to give, allowing the 5800X3D to be 38% faster at balanced, 46% faster at balance with DLSS quality, and 42% faster at basic, with a pretty massive boost to 1% lows. So once again, it seems both CPUs are fine here, but if you really want the maximum reduction to input latency without going AM5, it might be worth going for the 5800X3D for you, or for someone with a 240Hz monitor. But for someone just having a few casual games of COD, the 5600X is probably enough, to be honest, for multiplayer anyway. But yeah, now we have Returnal. Really like this game, don't think it's getting enough love. If you're into your roguelikes, it's definitely worth a go. The art style's pretty cool as well. Anyway, enough of my micro reviews. I used the built-in benchmark on this one, once again, to give me a more accurate, constant result, as in this game, obviously, everything keeps regenerating in different ways, so if you die in a benchmark run, you're pretty knackered. So we're starting out with 4K, this is Epic with RT Epic. You're neck and neck again with the higher settings, but when adding DLSS performance, the 5800X3D does start to pull away just a tiny little bit, but I wouldn't write a book about it, or make a video about it. So now we're going to turn RT off. This is still epic settings though. Well, it's a very similar story as RT on pretty much. No big difference. Lock 60 at epic, lock 90 at DLSS quality, and so on. And a slight advantage for the X3D with DLSS performance enabled. This game's actually pretty well optimised for once, and mainly relies on the GPU to run, especially at 4K. Now we're going down to medium settings with epic RT, and we're able to get 18% better averages, 15% better 1% lows, and 14% better minimums with DLSS performance, but the other settings are just matching within margin of error pretty much. So now we turn RT off. Not much to say with no DLSS. A tiny boost with DLSS quality maybe, it's probably within margin of error realistically, but with a nice boost with a 5800X3D of 17% on average and 46% 1% lows, and a 22% boost to the minimums with DLSS performance enabled. Now we have 1440p and we're going to start with epic settings with RT epic. And we're finally starting to see some differences at all the settings now, as the CPU becomes a little bit more important at 1440p. And it's looking like the 5600X has pretty much hit its limit, at least at these settings anyway, allowing the X3D to beat it by 30% on average with DLSS balance enabled, with much better 1% lows and minimums. Turning RT off now allows the 5600X a few more frames, but still hitting the limit with DLSS there, while the 5800X3D continues to increase its performance as the settings are turned down, allowing it to lock 120 FPSe with DLSS quality, although its lead is still not as big as it was when RT was enabled. Now we're going down to medium settings with RT epic, and the 600X is completely at a wall here, allowing the X3D a 35% lead with DLSS balanced enabled, a 32% lead with DLSS quality, and a small lead with DLSS turned off. Turning RT off, medium settings. Both CPUs capable of some great frame rates here, although both of them are completely bottlenecking the 4080 now. The 5600X taking so much abuse with DLSS balanced enabled that it's actually performing worse. Now going down to 1080p, we have epic with RT epic and DLSS quality. Some good gains with the X3D here, 21% without DLSS and 38% with. Now we turn RT off, and both CPUs are pretty much hitting the limit here, allowing the X3D 28% better averages with DLSS quality and 18% with it off. You get some great frame rates in this game with both CPUs. There is some big gains from the 5800X3D, but it's mainly when turning the settings right down, or when at 1440p or below. And even when you are at 1440p, the 5600X is still a great CPU. So unless you're really wanting to hold 120 FPS with RT on at 1440p in this game, the 5600X is probably enough for you. So now we have Star Wars Jedi Survivor, another game that really doesn't want to be friends with your CPU at all. I might even say it hates it. Well, it did on launch anyway, but it's definitely improved. The RT is really heavy on the CPU in this one though, so your CPU is really going to affect the frame rates. If you want to see my little loop that I use to collect the data, it's on any of my other Star Wars videos on the channel, and I will be releasing a video with the Reva stats tuner on for this game. So we start 4K epic with RT on, and as you can see here, you immediately become CPU limited when adding FSR on both CPUs. allowing the X3D a 22% lead with FSR balanced, and also allowing it to lock 60, which the 5600X can't do unfortunately. Now we turn the ray tracing off. The 5600X here is once again CPU limited once you add FSR, whereas the X3D now is able to get a lot higher frame rates, allowing it a 30% lead in the averages at best. But at least the 5600 is able to lock 60 now. Now we turn down to high settings with RT enabled, and once again we're CPU bottlenecked with FSR and can't get very good frame rates without it. There's kind of a theme going on here where you might get a bit sick of seeing these 76 averages and 64 averages for the 5600X, which once again unfortunately was unable to lock 60 with RT enabled. Turning RT off, and the 5800X3D was able to beat its epic settings by a good few frames here, whereas we're pretty stuck on the 5600X again, which allows the X3D to increase its lead to 38% with FSR balanced enabled. We won't include any medium settings here due to the CPU limitations, so go down to 1440p now. We've got epic with RT and FSR quality. We won't go any lower than that FSR wise, and you can probably see why. Already completely CPU limited here with RT enabled, and once again no lock 60 for the 5600X unfortunately, and both CPUs holding the 4080 back here. Well, or the engine is anyway. So we switch RT off now, and we're stuck in the mid 80s with the 600X once again with RT disabled, whereas you're able to get a lock 90 with FSR enabled with the 5800X 3D, giving it a lead of 50% over the 5600X here with FSR quality enabled. So we go down to 1440p high now with RT enabled, and it's just for a laugh really, because yeah, here we are again. It's getting pretty depressing for the 5600X now. And in all honesty, it's not looking that great for the 5800X 3D either. But at least it's a good few frames over 60. Although playing the game on a controller at least, to me it feels fine at 50. So now it looks like both CPUs have hit a wall here with RT off at high settings. The 5600X actually losing frames over its epic RT off setting. So now we're going down to 1080p for no apparent reason. Well, no other reason than the fact that I actually spent the time collecting the data, so I thought, balls to it. And as you can see from these settings here, it's looking pretty familiar. I could have just done this singular page for the entire game really. So this is probably the second game where I'd say you actually really could do with the 5800X 3D. Obviously if you want a lock 60 with RT enabled, you actually need it. And if you want anything over 70 odd frames a second locked, even with RT disabled, you're still going to be needing the 5800X 3D. This game is just so CPU limited, it's mental. It's like the new Witcher Enhanced Edition or whatever it's called. But like I said earlier, if you are playing the game on a controller, myself, I feel like it feels fine at around 45-50 frames a second, so you don't actually need 60, but if you want it, and you want RT, well, you want at least the 5800X 3D. Hopefully they'll update the game to the point where that isn't the case, but at the moment it is. Now we're going to move on to Fortnite, and this is running in DX12 mode, and on the ultra and high settings it does have lumen and nanite enabled. And TAA was used for anti-aliasing when DLSS was not enabled. I used the replay mode to collect my data from, so it's the exact same match in the exact same areas, but it's not actually from the replay that's on the screen, as my replay was deleted. Luckily, I managed to record the data first. At 4K epic settings here, we're neck and neck with both CPUs, being completely GPU limited, even with DLSS performance. All the numbers are within margin of error here. Decided to include higher levels of DLSS here than I normally would, as the style of the game I feel you can get away with it a little better. So moving down to high settings now. And now we start to see the X3D pull away just a little bit. Nothing major, just a tiny little bit on each setting. Now I turn the settings down to medium and low, and you're getting some massive frame rates with both CPUs now. The X3D is 16% faster at low settings, but can't see anyone getting too upset about only having 371 FPS, to be honest. Although I was able to max out a 240Hz monitor even on medium settings with the X3D. It does look better than low. Now moving down to 1440p Epic. Once again, there's just a very slight victory for the X3D. Nothing major, but is there when adding DLSS. So now we have high settings, and now the 5600X is completely CPU limited. And if you're on a 144Hz monitor at 1440p, it might start to seem worth it to buy the 5800X 3D in this game. If you like to have the eye candy and the bells and whistles and the moonbeams on while you're doing your killing. Anyway, now we move down to medium and low settings, and there's some ridiculous frame rates now. For all of those who just must have 432 FPS average. The 5800X 3D is perfect now, but seriously though, they're both ridiculous, and I doubt there's that many people out there that'll be able to notice the difference. Although, once again, those with the 240Hz monitor do get the benefit of being able to lock it at medium instead of low. Now we have 1080p Epic, and here both CPUs are able to lock 90, but the 5600X hits a wall when DLSS is enabled, allowing the 5800X 3D a 19% lead with DLSS balanced. Moving down to high settings, both CPUs are limited now. The X3D does gain a couple of frames by adding DLSS, but there's zero gain from the 5600. In fact, lost if anything. And you're getting a 25% lead over the 5600X with no DLSS here. Going down to medium and low settings to see how extravagant we can get. And we're pretty much the same as we were at 1440p now, allowing the X3D a 23% lead at best over the 5600X. So yeah, in this one, obviously both CPUs are capable of just getting extremely high frame rates, so if you're looking for the competitive edge of really high frames, like honestly either CPU is probably going to be fine for you. But if you're someone who plays at 1440p and you'd like to have all the nice shiny graphics turned on and get some pretty good frame rates, it might actually be worth going for the 5800X 3D for you. But it depends how much you value them extra few frames. Right, so last we have Plague Tale Requiem, and I thought I'd include this anyway, even though it's not really from 2023. But it's pretty demanding, and decided to do my little run in the little bit here with the rats, as someone in my comment section told me on my other video that it's the harshest bit on the CPU, so I thought I'd give it a go. Right, so we start off with 4K Ultra and we see the X3D just slightly better in the 1% lows and minimums. When adding DLSS, the 5600X hits a wall almost immediately, whereas the X3D is able to make slight gains with each additional level of DLSS. but still it's not a huge boost going down from DLSS quality to DLSS performance there, especially in the minimums, so I would say it's not really worth going below quality. We are getting a 27% boost in averages with the X3D at quality though still. Reducing the settings at 4K, we see that both CPUs are pretty much neck and neck, within margin of error anyway, until we go down in the low settings where there's a slight boost to performance for the X3D. I would recommend using DLSS quality in this game over reducing the settings, as I found it to reduce ghosting on certain things in the game, such as plants and certain particle effects. Anyway, we're going to move to 1440p now. And we're actually gaining nothing over 4K with the 5600X here, but we are getting a pretty good boost with the 5800X3D. Even though we're still running into a CPU bottleneck, we're getting 33% better averages with no DLSS, and with DLSS quality we're getting 38% better averages, 29% better 1% lows, and 27% better minimums. Now we turn down the settings again, and we see the numbers are very similar to when using DLSS here, and both CPUs are bottlenecking the 4080 at all settings, although both are still giving you a very playable experience.
Alright, be fast, be brave, and don't fall this time.
You can do it! Don't panic!
Too late for that!
Now we move down to 1080p, and the numbers are pretty similar to 1440p here. The 5800X3D beating the 600X by 40% at best. And once again, when we turn down the settings, we're seeing very similar numbers again, making the 5800X3D between 27 and 38% faster than the 5600X at settings I would use myself in this game.
We're getting closer to sunlight.
Maybe we'll get out closer to that tower. I can't wait to hear Manstevo.
As you can see in this one, it is a heavily CPU limited game at times, but other times it really isn't, so you'll find the performance is a lot closer together in different areas of the game. And there may be points where it's even further apart too. So thanks to the guy in the comments for telling me about the rats. Sorry, I can't remember your name, but cheers. But yeah, the 5600X still is capable of getting some good frame rates in this one. Not massively over 60 FPS, but if you are happy with that, then there's no need to go for the X3D in this game. Yeah, so that's the end of the video, and it's a bit of a mixed bag really. In a lot of the games it does seem that the 5600X is enough for the 4080, but there are certain times when if you want a locked 60 FPS experience you do need the 5800X 3D, especially if you'd like a locked 90 or even more than that in some of these new CPU demanding titles. So it's very dependent on the game that you want to play. So the question kind of becomes not is it enough for it, but how much does it hold the 4080 back? And it's actually quite a lot. So is it really worth it buying a 4080 if you have, or upgrading to a 5600X? Or would you be able to get 90% of the performance with a bit of DLSS with maybe a 4070 Ti or 7900 XT? I'm honestly not sure about the answer to that question, but it's a question worth asking. As you might find, you get stuck at the same frame rates when using say 4K with DLSS performance as you do when using a 4080 with the 5600X, at least in certain games where you're heavily CPU limited anyway, such as a Plague Tale there where you're getting 100 FPS and you can't get past it no matter what setting you change to. I'm pretty sure the 4070 Ti will be able to get 100 FPS in that game with this CPU and particular settings anyway, maybe 4K DLSS performance or 1440p DLSS quality. So as much as the 5600X is okay with the 4080, I mean, in most of the games, and most other games that aren't in this video or aren't so CPU limited, it'll be sound, but it definitely holds you back at times. And the 5800X 3D is the better match for the 4080 by far, especially in these modern single player titles. But even the 5800X 3D holds the 4080 back to some level anyway at certain settings. And in certain games like Star Wars with ray tracing enabled, you find a big difference when using a 7800X 3D than you would over the 5800X 3D. But as you all know, we can just upgrade forever and ever and ever really, until we're all absolute paupers, and then maybe we'll think about playing a computer game at some point. Weird. So you've just got to decide how much you're happy being held back. Anyway, these are just my thoughts on the CPUs and my opinions. Feel free to disagree or tell me I'm an idiot in the comments. You're probably right. Have a look through the data and you can decide for yourself whether you think it's worth going with the 5800X3D. I'm going to be working on some separate videos for a few other games like Fortnite, Last of Us, Star Wars and Battlefield, and also Warzone, comparing these CPUs together with the MSI overlay over the top for those who like to see that. And I also won't be talking very much, if at all, in those videos. But I hope the video offered you some value, and I hope you enjoyed it. So thanks a lot for watching my video. If you liked the video, please give it a like and subscribe for more. Thanks, bye.